When I think about consciousness and how people come to the topic of conscious leadership, they typically arrive at it from a variety of starting points. The academic journey is common, that is wanting to understand the history, the basis of consciousness. Another point of entry is self-development, wanting to further improve. And then some of us come at it from a place of personal crisis. I'd been a partner in a management consulting firm for 14 years, working with some of the largest organizations in the world, helping a number of large organizations do very, very good work. And they were admired, some of the top 10 best places to work in the world. And so I had a long history of doing very good work with organizations and was feeling very good about it, but I had a very one-dimensional life. In 2004, that all came crashing down. I had a very significant health crisis and spent over a year housebound and spent about 3.5 years trying to figure out what was my role in life. I entertained the questions such as, how was I going to spend the rest of my life? Was I ever going to continue to live? I wasn't sure that I was going to. It was through this experience that led me to this place of consciousness. I had a long history of doing some pretty significant organization development work, some executive coaching, a number of things that were terrific from a professional credentialing perspective. And I did have a good grounding in psychology, a good grounding in spirituality as a child, but I didn't really have what I would consider today a strong grounding in consciousness. And it's only been in the last 10 years that I've been able to come to this place of bringing my organizational development experience, my executive coaching background, 30 years of business history, and finally being able to bring consciousness. The novelist George Saunders was asked to give the commencement address at Syracuse University a few years ago. One of the things he shared with the students was a quote, "There's a very real danger that succeeding will take up your whole life while the big questions go untended." For most of us, certainly most people in organizations, we're constantly being pulled between these two ends of the spectrum of money and meaning, and not consciously asking the question, how do I spend my life? And for many of our leaders, many of our organizations, the playing field has been shifted so much to the bottom line and to the shareholders that stakeholders have been forgotten. As a result, the people in the organizations are focused very much on the money end of the spectrum rather than the meaning end of the spectrum, and the big questions go unanswered. People are spending their whole lives trying to climb the corporate ladder, trying to do the right thing, trying to play it safe, and not tending to those untended questions, pursuing success. For many of our organizations and for many of the individuals in those organizations, whether they're at the leadership level or other levels within the entity, they're focused on, how do I get promoted? How do I get to my next pay raise? How do I keep my job? How do I pay my bills? But it's a false duality of I either have to have the money or I have to have meaning. The observation I would share with you is a false duality has been created. Either I could go do something for meaning and go work for a nonprofit, or I can go make money. Benefit corporations or B Corps have emerged as an alternative, a for-profit company pursuing meaning by taking a multi-stakeholder approach. It's unfortunate that people are seeing it as a product of the Internal Revenue Code as opposed to a product of poor leadership. As leaders move to be more conscious and try to create a more conscious organization, part of the challenge they have is trying to repair the damage that's been done in their organizations and try to create some new models for what that might look like. A lot of the work I've done in the last decade has been working with leaders who are trying to come up with new organizational models so people can show up in a more conscious way. Part of the challenge they have encountered is that they are in new territory. Therefore, some of the initiatives they've undertaken have resulted in unintended consequences. I'll just share an example of a CEO I've worked with over the last couple of years. He started an organization with the sole purpose of trying to restore the rainforest. He wasn't interested in the bottom line other than making sure it was a sustainable business for all his employees. He wanted to build the cost of his raw materials coming from the rainforest, including restoration of the rainforest, into his cost of producing his product. It was resulting in an incredible life change for the people he was working with in the rainforest. It was resulting in trees getting replanted, the environment restored, and a superior product here in the US that he was selling, creating a significant livelihood for all of the people working in the organization. So by any measure, you would think he had figured it out and it was a great and wonderful thing. Unfortunately, one of the unintended consequences was the indigenous peoples he was working with were at the bottom of the social ladder within their culture. And And when they started to have some economic viability, when they started to have some opportunity, the other neighboring indigenous peoples became upset and they started killing the people that he had intended to help. That was an unintended consequence. I use that as an example as we move into this place of trying to create more conscious organizations, more conscious leadership. There will be unintended consequences as we create these new models for what it might look like. I could point to other examples of other leaders I've worked with, but it's going to be a rough period of time until we can figure this out. In part because there are the folks who don't want things to change, and they will be ground grippers. They will be holding on to the old ways of doing things and making it very difficult for these new models that are attempting to emerge. Every time these new models fail in some way, that will enable the ground grippers to hold on to the old ways of doing things. I think it's going to be a tumultuous transition.